Welcome back. Have you considered the possibility that the Hyrule royal family are not the good guys? In the entire saga, they are painted as though they are, with them having brought stability to the kingdom, uniting the races, and safeguarding the relic of the gods. But maybe, just maybe, there are dark secrets lurking under the surface. If you haven't considered this before, well, you must be new around here. Welcome to my channel. Today, I'm focusing on recent realizations regarding the events following Ocarina of Time leading into Twilight Princess. You see, on the surface it might seem as though Hyrule was simply repelling a mad Gerudo king, a man who was obsessed with taking the kingdom for himself. Well, dear viewer, I regret to inform you that things are a lot more complicated than that. I'm Cornelius Belmont, and let's talk about the truth of the Gerudo War. Thanks for watching the video. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to the channel. I've recently started a Patreon. More on that at the end. A special thanks to these people for letting me use their assets. Spoilers ahead for the following games. Let's get into it. The ancient Sheikah have a legend about the holy relic known as the Triforce. When a person touches it, their wish will be granted, but only if their heart is in balance. If not so, the relic will break apart into 3 pieces, one staying with the person who touched it, based on which virtue they are most aligned with. The others will disappear and go to individuals who are most aligned with those virtues. This is called a Triforce split. What isn't clear about this though is when these pieces manifest in the new holders. We see in Ocarina of Time that courage only manifests itself at the end of the game, despite it being in Link's possession for the majority of the second half. Likewise, in Twilight Princess, we see that power doesn't manifest itself until Ganondorf is being executed. It is unclear when it manifested in Princess Zelda. However, perhaps Faru had contacted her to make her aware of that fact. The important part, though, is that just because a person has a piece of the Triforce in them, doesn't mean that it is apparent to those around them, or even themselves. The holder may be entirely ignorant of the fact, and even if it is granting them some passive abilities, they may simply attribute that to other factors. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Link appears having been sent back to his childhood by Princess Zelda in the adult timeline, due to him being in possession of courage in that timeline. When she removed him, the relic shattered into 8 pieces, as we see in The Wind Waker. When he appeared in the Temple of Time, at that moment, because of his connection to courage, a Triforce split was triggered, one that was different than spoken about in the Sheikah legend. From the safety of the Temple of Light in the Sacred Realm, the relic split apart and courage went to Link. Perhaps it didn't manifest right away. Consider that the young hero of time may have been torn between returning to his forest home, a desire to find his fairy companion, and a duty to reveal Ganondorf's evil scheme to Princess Zelda. The Gorons were starving after all, and Lord Jabu Jabu was sick. I like to imagine that courage manifested itself to help the young hero make the right choice, which is why it is emblazoned on his hand when he confronts Princess Zelda in the courtyard. With that undeniable proof to his claim, the kingdom would formally reject the Gerudo King's false declarations of fealty, and in doing so would start a war with his people. One might ask if such a war was needed. Could they not simply repel the invaders? Both the Gorons and the Zora were united under the Hylian banner. Perhaps they could have, but there are reasons why they chose to pursue this war, and it is not a pretty picture. From Ganondorf's perspective, the Hylians somehow uncovered his scheme to steal the Triforce. Perhaps being so open about it was a bad idea. I mean, he literally threatened the Gorons and sealed off their food supply. But I digress. His plan was found out, and more importantly, he was ignorant of the young hero with the Triforce of Courage on his hand. appearing before the princess. Furthermore, he was ignorant that the Triforce was no longer in the sacred realm. More importantly, he was ignorant that the Triforce of Power was now inside of him. As with the initiation of the Triforce split, he would be the one most aligned with the virtue of power. Whatever passive abilities the relic would give him, he likely wouldn't question it, for he was already a very powerful warlock, one who had been raised by two very powerful witches. In fact, the only people who might have known about him being in possession of the relic would be those with knowledge of an alternate timeline that the young hero had come from. The royal family knew that Ganondorf had ended up in possession of the Triforce of Power, and they simply could not let him go. Consider this: why did Ganondorf resort to dissection to try to steal the relic? Could it be that he didn't have the military power to overcome the combined might of the Hylians, the Zora, and the Gorons? Perhaps knowing that they had the Triforce, an ultimate trump card with the power of the gods in it, he felt that he could not win that fight. Ganondorf resorted to trickery because it was the only avenue where he could win. Only by stealing their power and using it against them would he be able to triumph. Doesn't that sound familiar? With his scheme exposed, he would retreat into the desert with the Gerudo to perhaps evaluate a different means of taking the power, or perhaps he would give up entirely. The royal family, however, could not allow this. They wanted their relic back, and they could not reveal that it was in pieces to anybody, as that would threaten the delicate peace they had built during the Civil War. And so the Gerudo War happened, not because the Hylian kingdom was defending itself from a mad king, but because of the royal family's relentless pursuit of the power that they had lost. Many innocent and brainwashed Gerudo died in this conflict. The Hylian people were the aggressors, and in the end the Gerudo king was dragged to Arbiter's ground and sentenced to death. The royal family was forced to play a dangerous game here. Diplomacy with Ganondorf was not an option. He literally tried to steal the Triforce, and when another version of him was in possession of the Triforce of Power, he used that power to level the kingdom. They couldn't exactly tell him that he accidentally ended up in possession of the piece, and they also couldn't let him go. The only hope is that with his death, this piece would return to its rightful place in the sacred realm, or perhaps it would move on to the possession of a better person. Having erected a council of sages that were loyal to the royal family, a council of sages that specifically acted as Princess Zelda's tutors, they were prepared to do the deed. They even had a backup ready just in case the Triforce of Power manifested, for they knew just how dangerous Ganondorf in the other timeline was, and they knew that if they could not reclaim the piece, that it would be better to be locked away where it could not harm the kingdom. I would wager that the sword they had created had some sort of sealing power in it, perhaps to try and suppress the Gerudo King's power, similar to the replacement Master Sword that we see in The Wind Waker. The entire time, they had to keep the location of the piece a secret. Perhaps even most of the sages were unaware of this, given how shocked they were when it was manifesting. A divine prank, their Sage of Light called it, but far from it. This was political intrigue. I would venture a guess that the Sage of Water, who seemed to have been their leader, would be the only one aware of the truth on that day, and they were quickly silenced as the others flung the Gerudo King into the Twilight Realm. Hyrule's dark secret would remain. They would have to keep lying about their possession of the Triforce in order to secure their supremacy. The people would continue to be fed lies, propaganda, and the rest of the world, aware of the kingdom and its treasures, would continue to fear conflict with them. I once speculated on this channel that the Hero of Time abandoned Hyrule Kingdom, precisely because of dark truths like this, and I stand by that now. But that is a topic I shall revisit another time. It's a grim topic, but the outcome did not end well for any of the parties involved. Ganondorf would be imprisoned in the Twilight Realm, a dumping ground for Hyrule's worst offenders, whose inhabitants had made a home, a kingdom of their own resigned to their fate. Ganondorf would manipulate their people and use them for his own purpose, ever set on crawling his way back to his home so he could wipe Hyrule from existence. The royal family no longer had access to the Triforce. Their threats were empty, but carried weight as long as they could keep the facade going. If Hyrule was a nation of conquest, which we get hints of if we look over at the Downfall timeline, then perhaps disarming them of the relic ended up being a good thing. However, how they behave after the events of Twilight Princess, that is hard to say. The removal of the Triforce of Power had consequences too, as I discussed with my previous video with Hyrule Gamer. With it out of the world, the land would start to decay as Din's power used to stabilize it would no longer be present. Fortunately for everyone, Ganondorf clawed his way back to the world, returning it to a normal state. As for the Gerudo people as a whole, the remainder fled deep into the Desert of Doubt. They believed that their king had been killed in his attempted theft of the Triforce. And so when the next one was born 200 or so years later, they would be so reluctant to follow him that he would go rogue and break their laws seeking the power to attack the kingdom. As for what happened after those events, well, perhaps it is lost to the age of myth. The truth of the Gerudo War isn't one of Hyrule Kingdom defending itself from a jealous king. It's the story of the lengths Hyrule Kingdom is willing to go to secure its supremacy, to secure its most sacred relic. The slaughter of the Gerudo people, many of whom were brainwashed and forced to fight against their will, was a small price to pay for the kingdom to try and regain its relic. History is written by the victors, but today I hope that I've shown you that the brighter the picture, the darker the negative. Thank you for watching. So, what did you think of the video? Did Hyrule Kingdom need to chase Ganondorf to secure the piece of the Triforce he ended up with? Maybe you think that diplomacy was a viable tactic to deal with the Gerudo. Perhaps you think that I'm reading too much into things for this squeaky clean, family-friendly Nintendo game. Let me know in the comments below. This channel is supported by Patreon. Patreon is the backbone of many YouTube creators, and especially small ones like myself, it is vital to survival. If you like the content I create, and have the means to help support the channel, then please consider joining. We have a members-only Discord server where I discuss upcoming topics, and I always appreciate feedback. I love talking about these things, and I can get pretty chatty at 2 AM when I'm thinking about this stuff. Some of you may have noticed that I haven't put up a Judgment Time lately. This is because the artbook leak disrupted an episode that I was planning. So now that episode is on hold. I've also just been more in the mood to, well, talk about things lately. I have a few more collaborations coming though, so stay tuned for that. This has been Cornelius Belmont, and may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.